I still believe they botched Voldemort's death in the Harry Potter movies. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, Voldemort dramatically turns to dust and blows away, but in the books, his death is more ordinary. He crumples to the ground and dies like any ordinary person, symbolizing that after all that, he really was just a man and not some mythical being. Of course, the movies didn't really handle Voldemort's character in the best way. They left out way too much. Don't believe me? Here's a list of hidden Voldemort facts that the movies won't tell you. Out of all the teaching positions at Hogwarts, the most memorable one has to be the Defense Against the Dark Arts professorship. Not only was the class always filled with the most unique experiences like fighting boggarts,
that's a boggart, that is,
dealing with Cornish pixies, or even witnessing all 3 unforgivable curses, but the whole myth surrounding the teaching position was iconic. It basically became a running gag throughout the series that the teaching position couldn't stay filled. Quirrell was Voldemort's meat puppet, Lockhart was a fraud, Lupin had an issue with full moons, Moody wasn't really Moody, Umbridge had a run-in with the Centaurs, Snape got a big promotion, etc. But something the movies left out is the fact that Voldemort might be the reason for this strange phenomenon. It's heavily hinted in the books that Voldemort, after being denied the Defense Against the Dark Arts position not once but twice, put a powerful jinx on the position that makes it incapable of being filled for more than a year. You would think this is impossible, but this is a world where there's a lucky potion called Felix Felicis, so I don't doubt it anymore. Plus, Voldemort seems that spiteful, doesn't he? The whole prophecy subplot was not only a much bigger deal in the books than the movies, but it also revealed a different fact about the Dark Lord. The prophecy stated that the one who had the power to vanquish the Dark Lord would be born to those who defied him 3 times, and his birthday would be at the end of July. Neither can live while the other survives, and either must die at the hand of the other. Puts a lot of pressure on Harry and Voldemort, don't you think? But something that the movies don't really address is the role that Neville plays in the prophecy. This person also could mean Neville, as his birthday is right around Harry's birthday, and his parents defied him 3 times. But the reason the book series isn't about Neville is because Voldemort made the distinct choice to go after Harry, therefore sealing Harry and Voldemort's fate. The fact that the movies were vague about this is a bit of a disappointment because it highlights how Voldemort ultimately chose his own fate by going after Harry and not Neville. I wish we could have seen Voldemort's thinking process during this. Well, the Potters live closer to me and traffic is just killer today. Yeah, something like that. Also, my Voldemort impression is just my old man impression. I'm not good at impressions. Voldemort has deep ties with the House of Gaunt, an ancient family who are direct descendants from Salazar Slytherin, and their history is fascinating. Whole videos could be made about the Gaunts, but the most important thing you should know is their connection to the Resurrection Stone. In the movies, the stone just sort of pops up, but the books do a better job with the explanation. Turns out the stone was actually in the Horcrux ring that Dumbledore found and destroyed, a ring that belonged to the House of Gaunt before Tom stole it. Tom carried that ring with him throughout his time at Hogwarts, meaning he was carrying around the Resurrection Stone without even knowing it. Or maybe he did know and just didn't want to deal with all the people he killed. We know before he was Voldemort, the Dark Lord was Tom Riddle, but the movies leave out just how much he truly despised that name. In fact, on his path to becoming Voldemort, Tom murdered his father and his 2 grandparents by sneaking into their house and confronting them. Like, we know Voldemort is bad and all, but callously killing his father and grandparents? That's just dark. Oh, he's the Dark Lord. I get it. Okay, that... oh. Something the movies basically ignore is the fact that Voldemort wasn't even originally planning on killing Lily on the fateful night in Godric's Hollow. He was just there to probably kill James and Harry. The reason for this? He actually listened to his loyal Death Eater Snape. I mean, it's no secret that Snape was in love with Lily. It was practically broadcasted for everyone to read in the Daily Prophet. When Voldemort was going to go stop that pesky prophecy from coming true, Snape begged him to spare Lily's life. He agreed, but of course things went differently. When Lily refused to step aside and used herself as a shield to protect Harry, Voldemort tried to go through her. Of course, this backfired in more ways than one. Not only did this create a special bond around Harry that basically turned him into a giant reflector shield when Voldemort tried to use the killing curse on him, but it also caused Snape to finally break away from Voldemort for good. I think this hidden fact should have stayed in the movie. It fleshes out not only Snape and Voldemort, but also Lily. We know her death was tragic, but the fact that she could have lived if she didn't sacrifice herself makes her all the more heroic. The beauty about a massive book series with a lot of dialogue and inner thoughts is that you get a much better sense about how people are feeling. Although we all love the movies, they couldn't hit certain parts of the lore enough, and I think that's especially true when comparing Voldemort and Harry. The books do a lot more in exploring the parallels between the two sworn enemies, and a lot of that comes from a young Tom Riddle's experience growing up at Hogwarts. Obviously, Tom's life was a little difficult, so when he came to Hogwarts, he found a new home. Sure, he was power-hungry, ambitious, and wanted to live forever, but it was clear that he truly loved Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. You know who else had a horrible outside life and learned to think of Hogwarts as their second home? Harry Potter! By leaving out this detail in the movies, you miss exploring what makes these two so similar, which makes their final epic showdown on the grounds at Hogwarts all the more memorable. Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by memorable. The book's ending battle was epic, but the movie had Voldemort and Harry zipping around in weird smoke clouds, so it's whatever you prefer, I guess. The movies make it seem like Voldemort didn't want to be around the Dursleys either. And really, that's understandable. If I had to be in the same room with those three, I might lose my mind. The iciness of Petunia, the furious anger of Vernon, and the complete waste of space that is young Dudley Dursley is enough to make anyone want to avoid Privet Drive. Okay, fine, there's more of a reason why Voldemort didn't attack Harry while he stayed at the Dursleys, but it's just that the movies didn't really explain it that well. In fact, it explains why Harry had to keep going back to the Dursleys every summer, even though they kept him in a cupboard for most of his life. Turns out Dumbledore cast a bond of blood charm on the household that worked to protect Harry. When Petunia agreed to take Harry in and house him, it sealed the bond that made it impossible for Voldemort to harm Harry while he lived there. Does it seem like a bit of a cop-out? Maybe, but it's a detail that makes Voldemort seem a lot smarter than he was in the films. Now, if only that bond of blood forced the Dursleys to treat Harry like an actual human being, and not like a can of kidney beans that you just forget about and then throw away when the expiration date comes along. That would have been a nice addition, Dumbledore. One of the big things fans noticed that were changed from the book to the movies was the fate of the rat-like Peter Pettigrew. In the movies, he's presumably killed by Dobby after he opens the door to the cage, but anyone who reads the book knows his death is wildly different. In Goblet of Fire, Peter cuts off his hand to help bring Voldemort back from the dead, and Voldemort eventually repays him by giving him a brand new hand. This happens in the movie too, but what the film fails to pay off is the consequences of that hand. In the books, Peter actually helps Harry and Ron escape as repayment for the two sparing his life back in Prisoner of Azkaban. But then things take a turn for the worst for Wormtail. Since he betrayed Voldemort, his new hand actually turns on him and chokes him to death. Again, this is a fact and story beat that should have been left in. It not only provides the character more depth, but it also shows what to expect from Voldemort's gifts. The hand looked like a nice reward for Wormtail's troubles, but clearly the Dark Lord was planning a contingency in case the Weasley servant betrayed him. Hey, I don't think Voldemort could get where he was without being able to read other people. His ability to manipulate and influence those around him with both his charisma and his intensity helped him become the Dark Lord. And the books did a better job in regards to Voldemort recognizing potential in people. This is most apparent in the final Hogwarts battle. In the movies, after they return from the woods carrying Harry's limp body, Voldemort asks for anyone to join their side. Neville starts to pathetically limp toward the Death Eaters, and Voldemort mocks him, saying he was hoping for better. This is far and away different from how the scene plays out in the book. In fact, in the book, Voldemort actually compliments Neville, saying he would make a great Death Eater because of his skill and his pure blood. Of course, things go a little crazy from there. Neville gets the Sword of Gryffindor, and Harry reveals he's alive, and then more fighting starts. But it's the fact that Voldemort could see how strong Neville really was that's impressive. This was a relatively minor thing, but all it does is continue to show how smart Voldemort is overall. This last one both surprises me and doesn't surprise me. Voldemort is an incredibly vain individual. It makes sense because I don't think anyone could get to where Voldemort was without thinking he was just the bee's knees, but also, has he looked in the mirror lately? If you looked like Voldemort, would you think you were the greatest wizard ever with a face like that? It's worse knowing that he looked human growing up. Like, if he went noseless with that pale skin for all of his life, then that's one thing. But to go from Tom Riddle, which hunka, to Voldemort must have been a shock to the system. Anyways, the books do a better job in explaining how vain Voldemort can be with the simple fact that he refers to himself in the third person. It's minor, but a fascinating character detail that tells you much more about how Voldemort thinks of himself. Plus, let's be real here, Ralph Fiennes' Voldemort seemed to be having a lot of fun with some of the more exaggerated characteristics. So you're telling me he wasn't down to refer to himself in the third person? The ScreenRant voiceover guy disagrees. Man, that's actually a lot of fun. Voldemort is also supposed to have red eyes, which is something the movies also neglected to include. That's a real missed opportunity if I do say so myself. Red eyes would have drawn attention away from his lack of a nose, don't you think?
Pick up your wand, Potter! I said pick it up! Get up! Get up!